Hello! I'm going to explain the principles of animation that I think are important for video game animation and show examples of these principles with this silly little guy on Blender. Keep in mind there are 12 total principles of animation, but I'll only be showing and explaining the 7 that apply to the animations themselves to save time, and because I think those principles are the most important when making video game animations. First principle, squash and stretch. Squash and stretch is where you put distortion on the thing being animated to give it a sense of weight and flexibility. Objects are stretched when they go very fast, and objects are squashed when they come to a sudden stop, often seen in bouncing ball animations. While this is a little difficult to execute with a 3D model, in the case of this cube guy doing a jump, the part of its head with the antenna is squashed a little as it goes up, giving it the sense that the weight of the antennae is taking longer to catch up to the cube's movement, and its head is stretched as the cube comes down from the jump, giving it the sense that it is moving quicker here. It is then squashed again when the cube guy lands, giving the sudden stop more weight. Second principle, ease in, ease out. Ease in, ease out is arguably the key thing that makes an animation look natural. If you can get the hang of using it, your animation skills go up significantly. With this principle, instead of evenly spacing out the distance a character moves from one pose to another, you make the character move slower at the start and end of their movement. To do this, you need to add more frames as the character starts moving into the action, meaning more frames over a long period of time, slowly spread out the distance in the middle of the movement, and then add more frames closer together again at the end to ease out to the final pose. Here's a very simple example with cubes. Keep in mind Blender's automatic interpolation, which I used in this animation, does add a slight amount of easing in and out, but much of the movement in the middle is evenly spaced out, so it still isn't very natural. Most movements need some amount of easing in and out, especially jumps. If you look at my cube guy jumping again, the cube is moving less at the start of the jump as it goes into the air, and the top of the jump as the cube starts to go back down due to gravity. In this way, easing in and out is used as a character starts to change positions. Third principle, timing. Similar to ease in and out, timing is how much a character moves over time. If you want a character to move slower, you put more frames that are closer together between the two poses, and if you want a character to move faster, you put less frames that are farther apart between poses. Heavy movements that are meant to have a lot of weight to them tend to move slower, and lighter movements are fast. To get a better idea of what needs to move faster and slower in an action, you can use references from videos or from acting out a movement yourself, and observe the timings of different parts of a movement to see how the movement comes together in real life. When done well, timing is what makes a character look like it is following the laws of physics. Fourth principle, anticipation. Anticipation is the action that comes before and prepares for the main action. This explanation is a bit confusing, so try this. Stand up and jump. What was the first thing you did? Instead of going up into the air immediately, you bent your legs and moved down to build up the jump. That's anticipation. I used this in the cube jumping animation as well. Anticipation helps make a movement look more natural and allows the audience to better understand what a character is about to do before going into the main action, making the action read better. In this other example, the cube guy ducks down momentarily before popping back up to lift its leg. This ducking motion would be the anticipation. Fifth principle, arcs. Arcs are much easier to do in Blender without having to think about it compared to 2D animation, especially if you're animating with a rig like I am. Most character movement revolves around the character's joints, and so the principle of arcs is just to consider that limbs and most movement does not go straight from point A to point B. Instead, they take a circular path between poses, using the joint as the center point and the limb as the radius. Keeping arcs in mind keeps a character from losing volume, which makes them look more consistent between poses. Sixth principle, follow-through and overlapping action. Follow-through and overlapping action are sort of like the fine details in an animation, just like the fine details in a drawing or painting. They are additional movements done by outer parts of a character that continue even after the main action is done, which gives the character the feeling of existing in a world that follows the laws of physics. This is what the antennae I put on the cube guy is for. After the main movements, such as the jump and the cube guy sticking its leg out, the cube's antennae continues to move back and forth a little bit, giving the movement more life and making it less stiff. Seventh principle, secondary action. Secondary action is a little difficult to execute, but it's still a good idea to keep in mind when animating. It is the extra details and movement incorporated in an animation to give it more personality. For example, here are 2 different walk cycle animations of the same character. It's very easy to tell what sort of emotion the cube has as it walks, even though it has no face. This walk cycle is more springy and energetic. The character has more exaggerated up and down movement, it bends and swings its legs out with each step, and overall has more snappy and quick movements, which come together to make the animation look more lively. This walk cycle, on the other hand, is much more subdued. The character has its head leaning down, it barely lifts its legs to walk, and overall looks as though it has had a terrible day. While not practical for every animation, if you have multiple characters with different personalities, or want to make an emotion come across better to your audience, secondary action is good to consider.